Boom. According to that, I am live. Sorry, I was a bit late setting up tonight. I got a bit distracted with some work stuff. Good to see Quentin Rankid. Looking forward to see other people rock in. Remember, as always, say hello when you're in the chat. It's always nice to see who's here. Say where you are tuning in from in the world. I genuinely do not have a lot of subjects this week. It's just been another intense sort of personal work week for me. But yeah, because of that, that means actually you can do exactly what Quentin Rankid just did and ask me for things to talk about. I've got a few topics, a few bits and pieces, but yeah, Odie Jr., boom, 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 5 booms. It's pretty explosive. Good to have you in there. Love the Cavalier King Charles avatar as always. Great dog. And yes, you're on time. I'm late, but 4 kilogram ruby. Quint, you've got me. I don't know I don't know the story. Was there a 4 kilogram ruby that was not stolen? I wish I knew that. Runway Incursion. That's a new handle name to me. So good to see you indeed. And Paragoti, I noticed when I watched the video back last week that I don't think I shouted you out last week. So I'm definitely saying hello to Paragoti this week. Good to have you, Paragoti. Good to have you, Runway Incursion. Where are you joining from? Tech Art 2, howdy. Good to have you in here. Will, we've got Will. Hello. Good to see people rocking in. It is late, of course, for people in Australia and New Zealand, and early for people in other parts of the world. Always very glad to see who is coming in here from places like the US, where I know it's early in the morning. We've got Lucy. Welcome to you. Good to see you. And Erin, nice to have you back, as always. No worries, just warming up. I'm 5 minutes late starting up myself. Was just saying there's not a lot of topics. I mean, you know me, I can talk forever about nothing, but not a lot of topics. So because of that, do what Quentin Rankid did. At Mark Simon me, it will flash orange like you can see there in the comments, and I'm more likely to notice it because I talk and then I glance across at the comments every now and then, as you all know. So if you've got questions or topics for me, or comments you want to direct to me, that's the best way to get my attention. I've of course got my lined up topics here, which are flashing up on the screen. But yeah, how is everyone doing? What have you been up to this week? I've kind of been for me lately, afternoon in Germany. Well, good day. I didn't know that you were in Germany. It's funny, a name like Paragotti, I kind of assumed Italian. It reminds me of the opera singer, although it's a totally different name. So there you go. Well, nice to have someone in Germany that I now know is from Germany. So that's pretty cool. One thing I have been doing actually was I've been quite enjoying The Expanse. I think the final episode of season 5 happens this coming week. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to that. I think season 5 has been a pretty good season. I also, just yesterday, I watched the first 4 episodes of WandaVision. They're really short. They're like less than half hour long each, which I quite like. It makes them very, very watchable. I'm not into Avengers or Marvel or that whole thing very much. So, but it seemed interesting. I was trying to figure out why would they do a 1950s sort of sitcom format. What are they getting at? And yeah, I actually, I found, I won't give spoilers. If you have Disney Plus, it's worth watching. If you don't have Disney Plus, is it worth signing up for? Someone was asking today, and I think Mandalorian is worth signing up for just for that. But if you haven't signed up for whatever reason, or if you like signed out, waiting until the next season of Mandalorian is around, is it worth signing up for? No. But it's an interesting concept. I like the way that they're executing it. I like the fact that they held back a lot of the reveals. Like they didn't just spew their guts out on the first couple of episodes. So I enjoyed that. If you've been following me on Twitter, you may have noticed a highlight of my week. I don't know. I suppose perhaps I'm pregnant. I could be like nest building. I don't know. This area where I am sitting, where you see me every week, is where I actually sit and work like lately 14-hour days. I'm just here all the time. This is where my whole life is now. So I've been making my life this area a little bit more comfortable bit by bit, to the point now I can actually pretty confidently say that my work area here is actually now, I really like being in the office because you can focus on work at the office. But I'm now able to work here probably more comfortably than I could in the office, frankly. I'm used enough to video chatting, and I'm used enough to getting into focus mode here. So yeah, I started to realize more and more what a crappy chair I had. So if you're following me on Twitter, you may have noticed I did buy a Herman Miller chair. Herman Miller chairs are outrageously expensive. I actually used to work at a law firm where we had them all by default. And I remember when I wanted to buy a chair for home, I thought I'll just get one like work because those are comfy. And I looked it up and it was $2,500 for a brand new one. And I was kind of like, I was expecting maybe 300, 400 because it's pretty fancy, but I never imagined it cost more than my first car. My first car, my only car I've ever owned in New Zealand, I bought at 16 years old, is you could drive at 15 in New Zealand, and it was a Triumph Dolomite that I think was 1975 model. It was a great car, actually. But that was $1,500, and that's the only car I've ever owned because you don't need one in Tokyo. So the idea of having a chair that was more expensive than a good car that I'd owned was just a little bit too much. So I bought a $70 crap chair. But, you know, when you're sitting in it 14 hours a day and it hurts your bum, it's just not fun. So I was looking for a good chair. The Herman Millers are lovely, but, you know, I couldn't quite get past buying one new at that price. But I found a second-hand one for about a quarter of that price. And I got to say, using the car analogy, well, one, it does make sense because I spend most of my life on this chair now, and it's like buying a second-hand nice Mercedes-Benz. It's affordable, and it's built to last, like forever. These are not chairs that like fall apart. So, yeah, I'm really happy. I don't know if you can... I guess you'll see the top of it. It's not orange anymore. It's blue. Someone pointed out on Twitter it actually matches my custom keyboard, which wasn't intentional, but it was quite nice to notice that. But there you go. That's what's exciting in my life. Letting people rock in. Let's see who else has come into the comments. We've got Tudom. Tudom, I think, is... I recognize... I think you've commented before, but nice to have you in the chat, Tudom, and nice to have a question. Oh, before that, I'll go to the chat above. Quentin Rankett, according to what you heard, a $30 million ruby was stolen, but they said it was a disagreement between a store and the ruby had been consigned. Not sure why there was the confusion. Was this in Japan or globally or something? I must have missed it somehow, but I mean, the fact that 4 kilogram ruby exists is kind of amazing. Pardon me. I do not know about the story, I'm afraid. It must have missed me. Tudom, evening. I would love to hear my latest take on when Japan will hold national elections and who might come after Suga. Okay, Tudom. Good question. I think all bets of a snap election are absolutely off at the moment. I don't think it'll happen this year. In terms of who would be the next prime minister, it's also hard to think that the opposition is going to be able to win an election or put in a prime minister anytime soon. And there's no one in the opposition I can see who makes sense as a prime minister. So I would say right now that all eyes are on Kono. I mean, Ishiba's been sort of sitting there expecting it to be his turn after Abe, and that never came, and his stock has fallen. I'll tell you what, if Taro Kono, or Kono Taro as he prefers to be called, if he nails his latest Mission Impossible of getting the vaccine rolled out efficiently and quickly to most people in Japan, I mean, which given the logistics involved and Japan, it's a pretty tall order, but he's currently increasing in popularity. I quite like him myself, actually, which is weird. Yeah, if he does well at that, up to the Olympics, then he's definitely going to be in the box seat for being the next prime minister. But I would bet you a fair sum of money that the next change of prime minister is not going to happen because of an election, unless it was Suga stepping down for performing badly at the election. But I think they would still win. But I think it's more likely it would be an internal reshuffle. And I see that the stars right now are aligning at least for popularity around Kono. The thing about internal LDP politics, however, I mean, if it was just based on public popularity, Suga would never have become prime minister. It's much more to do with how you're doing within the LDP, within the governing party. And, Kono is a bit of a maverick, but he doesn't necessarily have the numbers. So we'll see. But that's who I'd put my money on. Good question. Mr. Cordychat, Pavarotti indeed. Lucy from West Australia had our first community transmission, I think, right? In 6 months, you have gone into lockdown on one case. It is funny how the law of big numbers, well, in fact, that's a totally different thing that I'm thinking of, law of big numbers, but it's funny how, like, now that we're, like, lately today, we had the numbers go down. We had like 690 cases. 2 weeks ago, we had on a Sunday, we had like 1,000 cases. And so my reaction is, oh, it's getting better. So it's kind of funny how in New Zealand and New South Wales and now Western Australia and so on, you get one case, and everyone freaks out, and the news is all like, how did that person get it, and what does that person do, and it's ruined their lives, which I hear about happening in Australia. Here in Japan, it's like 690. It's getting better. It's funny how quickly you become desensitized to the large numbers. Yeah, yeah. It's a good. I mean, it sucks that you're going into a lockdown again, Lucy. But there again, it's good that Australia is doing so well, and if you can, and you're in a position to stomp it out, which we're just not. So, yeah, I'm sorry to hear about that. That sucks. But I hope you come out of it soon. It did go by pretty quickly, I think, in Victoria and other places where it popped up again. Robert Ryan, good to see you. Oh, jumped ahead there. We've got Wing Star. Good to see you. Oh, and yes, chatted on Instagram the other week as well, I think. But yeah, very nice to see you, Wingstar. Good to have you in the comments. Good morning, where you are, I suppose. Yes, indeed. Who else have we got in here? Don't invest with Robin Hood, says Mr. Cordy Chap. Yes, indeed, Mr. Cordy Chap. Good to see you as always. Brusco Ferian, good to see you. Lucy, keep talking, please. I'll. Oh, your check is in the mail. Very nice. DJ Sunnyside Up, fam. You messed up your knee, so no surfing. Sorry to hear that. Knees are tough, and knees take a long time to get better if they get better. So take that easy there. Reminding me, by the way, that Taro Aso, indeed the next Prime Minister, reminds me that I need to make some music, which I really haven't done in a while. Subaru the car, excellent car it is as well. Good to see you there. Have I received any benefit for the TPP? New Zealand products are cheaper now. Oh, I don't know. The thing that I was, of course, really hoping for was imports of dairy products. ... You all know. And in the end of the day, that was put in one of the exception categories by Japan, that, there isn't going to be as much. I don't know if the 4 and 20 pies that are now in stable supply in most 7-Elevens, including 2 near my house, the fact that I can now have 4 and 20 pies for lunch like twice a week, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm enjoying it. And that is one of those things when I go to Australia, I just love eating meat pies, because you just don't have them in Japan, and now you have them here. So I would say that's materially improved my life quite a lot. I'm quite enjoying having them with Thai hot sweet chili sauce on top. So, yeah, I don't know if that's from the TPP. I mean, it's hard to say. The TPP, it just means lower tariffs, right? So perhaps it makes it easier to send products they wouldn't have sent otherwise, but maybe they were planning to send it anyway. Who knows? So I can't really connect much. I definitely think there's obviously room for more free trade, but we'll see. We'll see. It's kind of funny with all the talk, and I'm going to talk today about the UK joining the TPP. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on with that, but it's kind of funny. People are equating it like leaving the EU and joining the TPP as if the TPP is anything like the EU, and it's really totally different. I mean, setting aside, even I made what was a bit of a foolish comment. I shouldn't have said that, I mean, there were sovereignty implications of joining the EU, which there kind of are, but, and implying that there weren't with the TPP. But the TPP is fundamentally, like, from an outsider perspective, what the EU is about is not about free trade. I mean, it's kind of about free trade internally, but that free trade is predicated on adopting common standards and practices, including the common agricultural policy. People in Europe know how European farmers in Greece are paid money to not grow olives, so that they don't make too many and that they don't devalue in other parts. So the way that the economy, particularly agriculture, is managed in the EU is not based on free trade at all. It's actually based on centralized control. And the TPP is the antithesis of that. It is the removal of controls and free trade. So, theoretically, it should make stuff easier to buy here, and it should make it easier if I go to Singapore or New Zealand to be able to get stuff from Japan or whatever. Or at least the tariffs will be cheaper, and that should mean more stuff cheaper. The EU isn't designed for that. The EU is actually designed more to control the markets that people are in. It's a block. So, yeah, it's a very different thing for UK people. I think that's wrong to compare them in that respect. But I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question, Subaru the car. I suppose maybe you'd feel more the benefits outside of Japan than inside Japan, just because we're so large. But I am hoping to see more stuff in the shops. I mean, even before TPP, you have a lot of New Zealand chocolate. You have, you have bits and things that are signs that, New Zealand apples and fruit everywhere. But that was always on a case-by-case basis. So who knows? Not sure. Maybe there's some business opportunities, someone could do with that. Degens Konto, excellent to see you. Some pekora umeshu. What's pekora umeshu? I know I love umeshu. I'm not sure what pekora umeshu is, but that sounds pretty good. Who else have we got in here? Atomic Tom, 250k there in Germany. I didn't know that you were in Germany, Atomic Tom, or maybe I didn't, I forgot. But okay, nice to have 2 people from Germany there, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, Wingstar, I just said hello to, and boom, 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 boom. Oh, jumped ahead a little bit. Sergeant Bilko, excellent to see you, our man in Sweden. Nice to have people from all over the world. Actually, it is always a lot of fun for me to see that. Yes, Atomic Tom, you broke the automated. I did not set it that way. I don't know. Google is scary, isn't it? The algorithm just knows when I'm about to be triggered by an emoji, and it automatically detects it. Does anyone know why that even happens? Stonks indeed, and I think I got everybody up. If I missed you, say hello. If you're watching and you haven't said hello yet, say hello. I love that. It's yeah, spent a bit of time saying hello today, but there's not a lot of topics, so let's dive into what I have. Dairy derivatives, yes indeed. Butter bullion, yes, behave. Okay, so into the topics. Boom, this is kind of an oldie but a goodie. It's not really new, but Japanese who are not keen on getting married before are even less keen now. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting whether COVID has influenced that, but the currently dating statistics are once again declining. And yeah, it's kind of funny. Again, the government looks at this whole thing really more as a demographic and a baby-making problem, and that is certainly a dynamic of it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to look at this problem. I think I've shared on the show before my theory. Oh, I see Tick Out 2 as a question. No, I'll come back to that, but I don't actually have. I'll come back. But yeah, the idea of oh no, now I got distracted and I dropped my thought. Focus. Yeah, my theory on this whole thing about the population crunch, particularly perhaps more in places like Tokyo, which I admit are probably very different to what the most of Japan geographically is like. Most of Japan is rural, most of Japan is small cities, and this probably wouldn't apply so much. But the thing about Tokyo is it's if you're single, you can actually normally relatively easily afford a small apartment where you're completely independent and you have complete access to any sort of entertainment, hobby, work, anything you could ever want to do to realize yourself as a human being, as having this kind of hobby on the weekend, this kind of sport, this kind of cultural interaction, this kind of dating, this kind of, if you want to do that sort of thing, this kind of job, whatever. And so if you're someone who has a lot of personal interests and views something like a relationship as something which requires a compromising of those personal interests and hobbies, Tokyo is perfect. You can fill your boots and be too busy. And I remember dating Japanese people who had lots of hobbies, and they would like schedule dates like, okay, I can't see you next weekend, so let's try to catch up 2 weeks from now. Like their calendars were full. Sometimes that was one or two cases that was actually genuine. Other cases, I guess they were just going, they were playing around or whatever. But yeah, people you can have a busy, fulfilling life as a single person. Whereas when you move in with someone, you have to share relatively limited space, and you can't be as selfish. And it's so I mean, I think when you're in small towns, part of having grown up in small towns myself, I think the reason a lot of people get married young in small towns is, frankly, there isn't much else to do than get married and spend time with other people. But in Tokyo, you never have enough time to do everything. So in a way, I do look at the demographic problem in Japan and maybe in other countries as kind of a sign of success, that the society just becomes such a cool place to live that people don't want to, share. And it's hard to share. It's not easy to do. But you pile on top of that just how difficult it is, the fact that people now have to work often more and more, that they get paid, in terms of the cost of living is going up, and the wages to cost of living are down, the expectations of being able to own a house and be able to do all the things that give you the financial comfort to think, yeah, it'd be really good now that I could go home, spend time, raise a kid, all that sort of thing. No one is in that situation, men and women both working. And expecting to work. So yeah, it's kind of funny. The statistics are clear, and they are that Japan, it made big news that Korea lost the replacement rate of population a few months ago. Japan fell below that. Japan's population has been declining for years now. We went past that a while ago. So yeah, it keeps declining, and frankly, asking a bunch of 80-year-old politicians to figure out what's going on and what the answer is not helping. I mean, giving a cash bonus when you have a baby, it does take the cost. It's better than a slap in the face. It's better than the cost of going getting a baby in the US or something like that. But it's not gonna. People are not gonna like go and plan to have babies just to get the $500 check. It's nice, but are you gonna think of the lifelong cost of a kid? A $500 handshake is not gonna tip the balance on that. So yeah, it's kind of funny. I don't know how you combat it. It's another problem which I don't think you should try to. You probably could solve the problem. Some people, I guess, thought that maybe COVID, with people locked up at home and nothing better to do, might start making babies and getting married and stuff like that. And clearly that's not happening. In fact, it's pretty clear that COVID's caused a lot of marriages to be postponed and probably a lot of people to lose social interaction, which probably means that, yeah, it's probably actually going to cause less marriages. I mean, not that that necessarily leads to kids nowadays, but, that those things are even connected. But in Japan, they generally still are. And, it's probably going to cause an even greater decline in all of this. So, yeah, there's actually some big thinking. I think you've got to figure out, how do you incentivize, how do you make it worthwhile to do this, even without sacrificing the enjoyment and fulfillment people are increasingly getting on their own. Like, how do you get that to work? There are very few countries that have been able to turn around, short of there are countries, of course, like America and so on, that have mass immigration, and New Zealand does this through immigration. We try to boost our population. That's one way to do it. Very few countries succeed at this through births. Interesting example, Hungary has been increasing births, and actually the Japanese government's been studying. It's a bit of a funny one as well. I don't fully understand, but I do. All the news I hear about the government in Hungary is that they're, from what very little I know about them, is that they're extremely nationalist and anti-immigration, and it's partly a nationalist agenda to encourage Hungarians to have more kids. It's part of an anti-sort of immigrant agenda that the policies came out, but they seem to have been successful, and it might be worth studying what they're doing over there. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing. It's not unique to Japan. Countries in Europe and so on. I mean, declining fertility rates are something in developed countries all over the world, maybe for similar reasons, and no one's really got an answer to it. But an interesting thing. Going back and checking out the comments now. Yes. Do I do any investing like the Japanese stock market? No, I've thought about it, and I should, but it's one of those things that I just don't have the time to really learn about it enough to do it right. Although I think, yeah, I must admit, I do think I should. It would be cool after turn this into a stock tip show. Yes, everybody buy GameStop. I don't, but no, it's just not my thing. Although I feel silly for it not being my thing. I remember actually when I was working at a US law firm, and all my American friends had tons of stocks, and they were always sort of like talking, they would talk casually about how their stocks were doing and what they're investing and how well their portfolio was doing. And I always felt like the idiot not doing that. And when then Lehman happened, and all of a sudden I seemed like the smart one for not having got involved in the first place. But yeah, I feel like I should do a little bit. Going back down, Shubha says, fashionably late again. Buenos dias. Good to have you in the comments, man in Panama, or woman in Panama, I guess. I don't know exactly. And I hate about the English language that you that it's so gender specific all the time. It's true of European languages that everything. I mean, even tables have gender in Europe. In English, we're not quite as bad as like Spanish and French, but you can't express things without assuming a gender, and then it makes me sexist when I presume you're a man. But buenos dias. I was going a bit too deep with that. Good to have you in the chat, Shubhas. Tekka too. I'm betting it's a word frequency counter versus the regular chat. Not sure what you mean by that, but that's okay. Alrak2 or Alrach or Alrak299. Hi there, folks. Hi there, indeed. Good to see you. Glass of milk. See, glass of milk is okay. Dairy. It's just that specific. Just shake the glass too much, and it becomes censored. I don't know what's happening with that. Kindergartens are practically free now. Yeah, I mean, they've been making everything more accessible. So yeah, Thomas H, good to see you. Welcome into the chat. And Tai Nakamura, good to have you back. Shubha says male and not changing gender. Hey, well, you can be any gender that you want. I don't know, it's kind of funny. I do my best to be woke. I do my best to be entitled about this, but it does always keep changing. And now it is a thing that even assuming gender is binary as well is a thing that you're not supposed to do. Which, yeah. If I mean, all good. I just forgive me if I don't keep up. But yes, indeed. Shaking the glass too much, because butter, right? I guess you have to put a lid on the top. It's kind of funny. I was worried about not having many topics tonight, but it is 11 o'clock Japan time, and I am still on the first story. So let's go to the second story. Boom. Yes, the government, Nishimura, minister in charge of the pandemic response, right now looking after the state of emergency, has announced that they are preparing the stage 2 restart of the Go To Travel campaign. There was actually a scientific paper released, the first scientific paper actually directly linking the Go To Travel campaign to the massive third wave, nationwide third wave, where the first couple of waves of COVID in Japan were really just in the main cities. The third wave really went to all the popular tourist destinations all over the country. The government asserted that, of course, it had nothing to do with COVID, and that the Go To Travel campaign was genuinely an economic stimulus to offset the hardship suffered, particularly by restaurants and tourism operators, by the effects of shutdowns, particularly big city visitors not visiting rural towns, which themselves had shut down and actually tried to restrict people from Tokyo visiting them in order to protect them from getting Tokyo kuri's through coronavirus. So of course, yes, it was a well-intentioned campaign to promote tourism and the economy and so on, that actually showed good results, and it had nothing to do with the $450,000 donation to the party president of the LDP by the Tourism Association, who rammed hell or high water the Go To Travel campaign even as the coronavirus was going up, and the prefectures that had the struggling tourist industries that had shut down travel from Tokyo were screaming at the government, "What are you doing? Have you lost your minds?" They did it anyway because, donations. I don't know what's more embarrassing, the idea that Japan would make an opposite of good policy during a pandemic over party political donations, or that they would actually sacrifice 4,000 lives and the economic stability and security of the country from the pandemic for the sake of $450,000 paid to a single elderly person. But yes, not only did it work, it still is working. They're going to reboot it. I don't know why they just don't call it the second wave of Go To. It is the... I mean, seriously, so I've talked before about how Japanese politics reminds me of Brewster's Millions. It's like they gave them, they give them all the popularity and all the advantages and all the control of government, or no opposition, and they're just trying. It's like they're trying to self-destruct and lose on purpose, like as part of a bet that they're not sharing with the world. Brewster's Millions, by the way, is an old movie, Richard Pryor, 1970s, I think. But it's a great movie. You should all watch it. And Trading Places, classic movies. The hell, we're gonna have Go To Travel again. So, and this is why nobody's paying attention to the state of emergency now. It's the government's been paying people to go out and to go traveling even during all of this. So it's kind of silly. But anyway, Tickart too. The butter word used too much on its own, and it auto-flagged. Is that it? Maybe it was the frequent use. I mean, that would actually still mean that it was indeed, the comment is here. It would mean a contextual recognition that is triggering me, and everyone likes to trigger me with it. The problem, of course, being that if I can see it and you can see that I see it, so it doesn't really make much of a difference putting the auto. It's just annoying that it shows it censored like that. Hey, bro, Barry Bonds, good to see you. Good to have you in the chat. Good to have everybody here in the chat. And that is we're still doing nutty stuff. That is my beautiful chair. It's got that sort of spine, the orange chair at the back that is currently burning in hell. It's on its way to Sodaigomi, but yeah, that I don't know. It was good enough for using for like half an hour to check email at home, late nights or whatever. But that is not a 14 hours a day chair. It's basically I was just sitting on metal, on the bottom. All the padding was gone. It was awful. This new chair has a mesh bottom. There's no actual metal solid underneath it. It's like sitting in a really firm sort of hammock. It's so nice. And you know what? For all the time that I spend in it, it's one of these things. It's like a watch or a wallet. It's something, if you're going to use it every day, it's worth paying a bit extra for. I came around the moment I sat in it. I was like, okay, yeah, this was money well spent. So that is my say hello to my little friend. That is a terrible accent, but it's a better Cuban accent than Al Pacino. But that is a great movie. Anyway, a funny thing happened to me on Twitter this week. The New Yorker, which actually posts, the New Yorker is one of those, I'm sure most of you know what it is, but it's one of those sort of news magazines that publishes essays by very good writers about interesting topics. And, they're very good at that sort of thing, about just having things that are just, good long reads that are well thought through and entertaining and so on. And it's a good thing to read. But they are one of the kinds of places that you often see the sort of culture, American sort of, like cooking shows or travel shows where people are trying to show that they're a bit more cultured. There is a thing, they used to do it with French, and lately you see it happening more with Japanese, where people like to, demonstrate how cultured they are by talking about Japanese culture and, throwing around words. They like people used to use French words to show that they were sort of educated. There's this word in French and it really doesn't mean anything in English, like putain. And you cannot express the true emotion and true meaning of the word in English. There is no translation of it, except usually there is. But they can sort of build up this sort of aura, this sort of cultural knowledge around it, and write this essay about putain, and how it is a how it has this very special history and whatnot. It gets a little bit funny sometimes when you see people. It definitely happened with the Marie Kondo thing and so on, where people would talk about words which have translations, but they would just play up the mysticism a bit of the exoticism of words with Japanese. So when I saw the New Yorker plugging this essay that they put up, talking about Japanese have a thing called Osoji. Soji is cleaning up. Osoji is a big cleanup. It's a big cleanup. It almost directly mechanically translates exactly as it is. But I saw this tweet which was sort of saying that Japanese have a unique tradition of osoji, and I was kind of like, oh, here we go again. You can hear the Peruvian air flutes playing and the sort of the Mr. Miyagi balancing on a log. I was like, no, so I made fun of the tweet. I said that osoji, untranslatable term that can be translated as spring cleaning. And I was just poking fun. And I got a lot of retweets. However, I also then got a sharp reminder that the world of English-speaking people in the Twitter online community is quite small. And it turns out that one of my favorite, most highly recommended Japanese culture, pop culture experts, who's written books, who's got podcasts, who's got blogs, and is amazing, is Matt Elt. And Matt Elt, the other person who runs the Matt Elt blog and so on, is his wife, Hiroko Yoda, who I didn't realize had written the article. And I did the tweet. I was throwing popcorn and being an obnoxious, back of the bus school kid, 4-year-old brat, just poking fun, and I didn't actually read anything. And I noticed later on that, oh crap, this is actually written by someone who might know what they're talking about. And I was maybe being a bit too harsh. So I actually did go in and I read this article, Japan's Long History of Tidying Up. And it turns out, as you would expect of the New Yorker and of, I keep saying Matt Elt because that's kind of his handle name, but she is also co-founder of El Japan. So, she's the wife, but basically El Japan. But the best. I mean, Matt Eld is one of the best people. If you ever get a chance to see a podcast or an interview with him, whatever, talking about anything from Hello Kitty to, the history of Japanese pop culture. And what's great about it is that not only does he know the Japanese pop culture inside out, but he can tie it to all of the Edo period and ancient culture, and he explains it all super interestingly. And lo and behold, his wife is good at that too. And she actually goes through the sort of not only the traditions about how, yes, Japanese like to clean up their houses and they have a reputation for being clean even back when people first arrived in Japan, but she goes into the ideas of how the connections of filth and so on with yokai, how the big cleanups at the end of the year that they used to do was associated with cleaning soot. From the internal fires would cause all the soot to build up inside the house, and they'd clean all of that out. And there was this sort of belief that the yokai had germs and spread sickness or whatever, that they had like these sort of monster sort of germs or whatever spirits inside of them. And this is directly connected. One of the things about Totoro that I always didn't like, there's things I see in those Ghibli, films and whatnot. There's a lot of references there, like to monsters and spirits, that I'm just not up to date. I don't really understand very well, frankly. And the idea of Japanese yokai, sort of monster ghost spirits and stuff like that, I'm also not very up on. They are experts on it, and they were explaining that, yeah, that was a thing. Those sort of little soot creatures, the little fun sort of friends or whatever, like hiding up in the corners. That's based on the concept of the sort of yokai that built up in houses that weren't cleaned regularly. Which implied the age of the place that they were going into. And she actually explains all of this stuff, and it's super interesting. So, look, I threw a couple of peanuts on Twitter, and I immediately regretted it, because the article is actually an excellent read, and it is worth reading, and I highly recommend it. Japan's Long History of Tidying Up. Shame on me. It is funny. It is really important, actually, now and again, when making fun of I assumed was a big sort of faceless American place, just sort of, doing the Peruvian air flute stuff about Japan. No, there are actually people behind it, and sometimes they're actually quite good people who actually know what they're doing. And that was a good reminder, yes, that even people on on Twitter are people. Which I think I do a pretty good job of, but I was guilty in this case. So yeah, it was an excellent read. I highly recommend it. I walked into the wrong neighborhood. I've done that many a time. The great thing about walking into the wrong neighborhood in Japan is that you're totally fine. But yes, just checking the comments. We have Tekka too. That's what you said before. We got Haber from Barry Bonds. Okay, so there's not much. How much did the chair cost? The chair cost 6,500 yen. So it cost roughly $600, but less than $600, which is about, well, actually, I've seen that you can get the new version of this, which is actually, they've released like a co-made version with Logitech. Like, they're selling this chair now like as a gaming chair. It's the Herman Miller Embody is the name of the chair. And it is, you can get it for like $1,500. So it's about 40% of the full price. This is 10 years old, but it looks brand new, and these things are made to last. So yeah, and you know what? Now that I've got it, I actually feel like, okay, it might be worth it. I mean, I don't own a car, so I'm saving a bunch of money from that, and I sit in this thing all day. So it is worth having something that doesn't hurt your bum or your back. So yeah, it was cheap. I wouldn't have imagined paying more than $200 or $300 for a chair before this, but having sat in that crappy regular office chair for a long time and then sitting on this, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'll go back. So yeah, that is the answer to your question, Mr. Cordy Chap. Yeah, indeed, Sergeant Bilko, the chair does match the keyboard nicely. I guess it's more to do with my taste. I actually had the choice of getting like a purple one, a green one, or this. And the green one, I'll be honest, was actually in tidier nick than this one. This one was a bit more scuffed up. Showed a bit more signs of use. Had some spilt coffee that I was able to sort of wipe off, and some stains and so on, but on the metal parts, which I was able to clean off. But the green one was actually nicer. But I thought, yeah, I like this color better. If I'm going to pick a chair, I might as well get a color that looks nice. And then the mesh was all in good shape. But you know what? I was drawn to that. I chose all the colors on the keyboard, so I guess that's it. I like the colors. Yeah, Atomic Tom. It's funny. Well, going down the rabbit hole of researching before getting the chair. When you watch a lot of what's a good chair for an office chair or whatever. And there are a lot of videos on YouTube of people testing different sort of chairs, and everyone bashes pretty hard on the old gamer chair, the old racing car shaped gamer chair phenomenon. Everybody seems pretty unanimous that those weird cushioning and body catching sort of race cars with weird pillows type design gamer chairs are pretty universally, every review that you see, complete garbage, like not worth at all. They obviously still sell okay, but the reviews of people who have had them for long periods of time and doing chair reviews, they're like, no. It's funny, the Herman Miller chairs, I saw a couple of really good in-depth reviews which talked about how, yeah, they're not automatically great. You know, yeah, the point is they've got a lot of settings which you have to figure out to use to get it exactly right for you. But it's more after you've used them for a while. It's sort of like the more you use it, the more you appreciate it. But yeah, this is just it's just a nice chair. So continuing on, the Olympics. I've had so many people ask me in the last week. I've had 2 or 3 different people overseas ask me, so is Japan really going to do the Olympics? I did mention last week about the kerfuffle where somebody who was not an authorized person to leak to got a leak from the Times, I think the UK paper. I thought it was Bloomberg, but it turned out it was the Times. The Bloomberg correspondent in Tokyo was good enough to send me a tweet with a picture of Shaggy looking at the camera saying it wasn't me. So yeah, that was pretty definitive. It was the Times saying that, oh, the government's looking for a way to cancel the Olympics and save face. And of course, the leak going out caused the government to need to go and do the opposite and actually double down and say, oh no, we're definitely totally doing this. It remains so stupid. That guy in the photo, of course, Yoshiro Mori, the worst. I've heard people say that there are worse prime ministers like Konoe, for example, who was just before Hideki Tojo, that there are worse prime ministers. But yeah, I don't know. Well, at least in all of my time in Japan, and I've seen a fair few pretty bad prime ministers, but I think that guy was the worst prime minister that Japan ever had. He actually, failed to show up at a national crisis when a boat was sunk accidentally by an American submarine off Hawaii that killed a whole bunch of Japanese people because he was on the golf course playing a golf game and he had a bet on the game. He had to resign not long after that. His own cabinet secretary threw him under the bus and said he was an embarrassment to work for. But he's in charge of the Olympics now, and yeah, no one thinks it should happen. Again, the debacle happening in Australia with the tennis, with just a couple of hundred athletes. Imagine you multiply that to 195 countries and 100,000 just athletes and staff coming to Japan. And the absolute certainty that they're going to be bringing every variant of the coronavirus with them. Even if the whole country here is like 0 cases, it won't make a difference if you have 100,000 athletes coming and doing what athletes do, as well as sports. How is it a good idea to have the Olympics this year? Even without all of this, there are a lot of people that were against it. But right now, and the fact that it's costing such an absurd amount of money that's coming doubly out of my national and my Tokyo taxes, and yet we're not going to be able to probably attend or see any of the events. Not that I was thinking of doing that anyway, but even as an event, we're not going to get to participate in it. Nobody's going to come and see it. Well, what the hell is the point? So I don't know. It's not even like I'm strictly against it. I like the Olympics. It's just like this is dumb, So this is insane and stupid. But nobody can pull themselves. Nobody has the courage to say that it needs to be stopped now and that this is dumb and we should just move ahead and focus on Beijing next year. And just draw a line under this and maybe try again in 2032. No one's brave enough to do that, and they're just frankly going on delusionally. And they may delusionally go all the way on to July and actually doing it, but for what purpose? So it doesn't make any sense to me. Did that guy get 450k too? Well, that guy got more. I mean, so they're finding out that he, for example, they again, apart from the consultant fees that they paid people connected with the committee that made the decision on the Olympics, that they received some dodgy consulting fees of $1 million and whatnot. They just found another consulting fee to Dentsu. That said, the Dentsu person clearly wasn't influential in the decision of where the Olympics go. But again, there's all the suspicious tossing around of money and whatever associated with this. I suppose the Dentsu bribe could be helpful for keeping corporate sponsorship support and whatnot. I mean, Dentsu is basically establishment mafia. They can make anyone do anything in Japan business. So their power is amazing. Basically the de facto monopoly advertising agency in Japan. Who knows? No idea. Digital Olympics without the audience can be realistic. Yeah. I mean, And you know what? A real Olympics with all the digital power and replays. I mean, they were talking about doing things like having holograms and center guys so that people could watch the 100 meters, like, you know, like in real life in different venues around Japan. And all of these ideas, which I think we're being built up to and would be super cool. And that's what I expect to see from a Tokyo Olympics. But we're not going to get any of that. So why? I mean, yeah, it's just dumb. So anyway, that is happening. People are asking the question. England joining the, England, geez, I did it again. I did this a few weeks ago. The United Kingdom, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, and Cornwall. I've been to Cornwall, and believe me, they think that they're an extra country there, so I'm going to say them separately. Yeah, they're all of them, all the gang. They are joining the TPP. And what does it mean? Well, I don't know. I mean, like I was saying before, it's a very different thing to the EU. They're not joining, an economic bloc or a single sort of economy that's internally managed and controlled, and externally negotiates tariffs and basically prevents trade with the outside and tries to double down on the prosperity of people on the inside by walling itself off from the world, which is basically what the EU does. The TPP is the opposite. TPP is founded by countries like New Zealand and Singapore and so on that were shafted by the UK specifically joining the EU, and were forced to fend for ourselves in the jungle of global free trade, and found that the biggest threat to New Zealand and Singapore's economic survival was countries like blocs like the EU and countries like the UK that suddenly put up trade barriers that made it impossible for us to send our stuff to them to make money. So, we the whole philosophy behind the TPP by the original 4 countries that founded it, Brunei, Singapore, New Zealand, and there was one other, Chile, I think, was the idea that we think that morally, I mean, it's of course for our benefit, but also morally, that world trade should be based on openness, not based on barriers and control and so on. And it was saying what a lot of countries like the United States say is rhetoric, but don't actually back up, because America will back out of free trade the moment it becomes not convenient for the US. The US just assumes it's highly competitive, which it is. But when that reality isn't true, it will immediately, turn pretty nasty and be protectionist, just as much as France. But based on these principles, it attracted 11 members, including Japan, and the idea is to grow, and they will grow by causing countries to stop using tariffs and blockers and so on. So it's very different in that regard to the EU. It's a pure, it's a commitment to open trade. And in that respect, if it means that we get, I was trying to think today, what am I excited about getting from the UK? I suppose maybe some more Cadbury's. I mean, we have all that stuff in New Zealand anyway, but, some fruit gums, perhaps. I quite like Rowntree's fruit gums. Not much else, honestly. But if you're a UK business and you're looking for, a bloc which, with current members, I think has something like 300 million people, and, could rapidly become very much bigger than that, or quite wealthy and well connected. It definitely means for the UK, it'll be, I expect, much easier for you to use Japanese cars again, and whatnot. And at the end of the day, this is what, the Britain's wealth used to be based on trade with the whole Commonwealth, including New Zealand and Australia and the Pacific. So some people saying it's weird for the UK to be pretending it's a Pacific country now, especially, of course, when they have the UK right there. But the UK isn't an open trading bloc. I mean, this is what the whole problem is over there. It'd be great if the EU joined the TPP, which would mean they'd have to universally commit to dropping all of their trade barriers, which I don't think that they'd ever do. But that, to me, that's what the whole world should become. It's not intended as a regional trading bloc. It's intended as a zone of countries that are actually committed to open and not being a bloc. So, Marmite. Yeah, Marmite's okay. We have Marmite in New Zealand. We actually prefer it to Vegemite, the Australian version. So, welcome UK. Again, I still think, of course, Brexit is just the most insanely self-defeatist, stupid thing a country could ever do to itself. And it was clearly delusional in what motivated a lot of the people to do it. And there's a lot of pain over there. And I realize that even raising it, there's no way to have any kind of constructive or positive conversation with people who associate it with power politics in the UK. And I don't really care about that. I'm just glad to have you guys and the chance to possibly, I'll even accept UK butter. I mean, I'd much rather have New Zealand butter. I mean, New Zealand, we used to sell our butter to the UK. The idea of getting it from the UK instead of New Zealand is just a wasted opportunity. But, I'll take whatever UK's got to sell that I would want. So they're good news. Um, there's a photo of these are Sony, basically these are like studio headphones. They're actual they're not fancy consumer. You actually buy these like in a white box there, but they are these Sony headphones, and they're the kind of the Technics SL1200s of headphones, in terms of they are the heavy duty, built like a tank, last forever, that every TV studio, music, sound studio, whatever, if you just want really solidly built, never break, really accurate, clear sound, will just show you the sound, that whatever you're connecting it to, it will just show you the sound really clearly. No bass adjustment, no digital anything. These things have been around, unlike the SL1200s, have been around unmodified for like 20-30 years, and people who buy them use them for life, and they're just rock solid. These are just really, really good, solid headphones. And the one problem with headphones of any sort is that as solidly as the wiring and the headset's made, I mean, this is made to last sort of for life. The first thing that goes wrong with these things is, of course, the old earmuffs on them, the ear pads. And, they're made out of leather or even synthetic stuff. And normally, after a few years of dryness and humidity and then dryness and then whatever, they start to disintegrate, and you get little, black flecks of things all over the place. And that happened, and I discovered a few years ago that you can actually pretty easily replace the ear pads off any sort of expensive headphones, so you don't have to get rid of them for that. And you can actually use the opportunity of getting the ear pads to get sometimes some nice flashy coloured ones or whatever, give it a bit of personality. So I quite like doing that, and I've done that a couple of times on these. Actually, I've changed the ear pads. However, I noticed today it was starting to get annoying that the head band on that is also made of leather, and that also just hit that age where it was starting to flake, and that's really annoying if that happens. So I was looking around today. If you're on Twitter, you would have seen, but for now I just put tape over it just to stop it flaking everywhere. I did get on Amazon, I did buy a cover that's made to fit this, which I think I'll put on top of this, but at least this will just stop it dropping everywhere. I guess I'm not going to wear it in public, but the point is that these are just really, really good headphones. And I didn't want to biff them away, so I just put some canvas duct tape over it for now. But those are good things. Haggis, of course, that's what I was missing. Travis Moore, excellent to see you there in the chat as well. Harry Potter sauce, yes. We know what, I've got Liam Perrins, but the thing is, a lot of the stuff you can already get in Japan anyway. I mean, I guess it'll be cheaper, and that'll be good. But yeah, Black Tango, good to have our man or woman in Greece, if I recall correctly. And yes, indeed, I hate when earpads turn into grunge. But of course, important to remember, you should not throw out your headphones when the earpads disintegrate. You can almost always buy pretty cheap, and it's actually pretty fun, putting in your own earpads to replace them. And normally the electrics of headphones are pretty basic. They're not even electrics. They're just basically some magnets and wires, and they'll last for pretty much forever. So I wonder if they almost use leather or the product, the disintegratable parts on purpose to get you to buy new ones in a few years. But anyway, these have lasted like 15 years for me, and the top has just disintegrated. But I am going to keep them alive because they're just great headphones for working on. So yeah. I should get the same color as I should get the same color. Hey, you're tempting me now. That's a good idea there. Brascafarian, thank you for the thought. You're a bloke. Good on you. Well, good to have Black Tengu commenting there, and good to have you in the chat. Speaking of silliness during the state of emergency and the pandemic, you may have heard that Sony, of course, with the global demand for PlayStation 5s going crazy with everyone shut up at home and wanting to play better video games, Sony decided that they would prioritize the manufacturing of PlayStation 5s, that most new PlayStation 5s will not be sold in Japan. They're prioritizing selling them in the US and overseas markets, which means that in Japan, you have basically, other than a few which were kept for release, it's basically been impossible for 2 or 3 months to be able to buy any PlayStation 5s. It turned out that Yodobashi Camera, one of the biggest electronic chains in Japan, one of the biggest electronic stores, got a stock. And they thought that, when they got a limited release of PlayStation 5s to sell, they could have done a lottery, they could have done it online. Any way they could have done it to sort of manage the flood of tens of millions of Japanese gamers desperate to get their hands on this thing. They decided the best way to do this would be, say, come to our shop, and if you rush, you might get one. The result was the inevitable chaos ensued. The Akiba flagship store of Yodobashi Camera was overwhelmed with basically riots of people rushing, shoving, punching, trying to get in. A huge Mitsu situation where people were getting injured. Police were called in to break it up and force them out. And you know how this was a good idea ever during a state of emergency for Yodobashi Camera to pull a stunt of basically having people cram into their flagship store and try to kill each other for one of these machines. Especially now, I mean, you know, you can get everything online. Like, what are they doing? So yeah, that was a disaster, bad idea. Another just interesting thing, where part of Japan's success with its management of COVID-19 is attributed to its contact tracing methodology, where rather than trying to test everybody and contact trace every person who has COVID-19, they focus just on having these kind of special investigators in every local government in Japan who are dedicated to tracing clusters and figuring out where clusters were, rather than chasing all the isolated cases. Hey, Eric Ann, nice of you to subscribe. So, yeah, they, I don't know why it does the zombie animation, but I'll take it. It turns out, however, that, they get the information. It's not like in Australia or other places where they'll sort of name and shame people or whatever, and they'll show what they've, where they've been or what they did, or who was responsible and went to a barbecue, or who went to a night establishment or whatever. So they do it all confidentially in order to get the information that's needed to sort of do their best with contact tracing and following up and resolving these things. And it's done pretty well for managing the issue. But now the stats are coming out that 40% of cases where these investigators try to find out, okay, where did these people go and where did they get this from and where were the clusters, 40% of people are just not cooperating. Interestingly as well, the government tried to pass a law during the week to actually allow police powers to arrest people who refuse to hospitalization for COVID-19. And who don't comply with shutdown requests, businesses, criminal penalties for businesses and individuals. The opposition said it's not democratic to have penalties to enforce a shutdown. It's kind of funny. Most democracies totally have penalties and have police enforcement ability associated with lockdowns, but there still is a bridge too far for Japan, and they actually stepped back from that. They've taken away all the imprisonment penalties, and they dramatically lowered the financial penalties to basically mean it's just going to be a lot of firm asking. And that's it. We're actually on time, and that is indeed Thomas H. It's incredible that they thought that was a good idea. Bloke Tengu, yes. So that is all the topics that I had. I said I didn't have very much, and look at that, I finished on time. It's wonderful as always to see you all there in the comments, and really appreciate the chat. It's been a funny week. I guess we've got another week coming up. You always hope for it not to be eventful, but there again, then I won't have anything to talk about next week. Interesting stuff going on in the world at the moment. But is there a constitutional guarantee of due process in Japan? I guess there is. I mean, the Constitution, when the Americans wrote it, I think they probably would have put something like that in. There are constitutional cases all the time challenging aspects of whether someone was given due process. But it's more based on whether their right to have something was violated. So I think there is. I don't know what the word for habeas corpus or anything is in Japanese, but I assume that there is. I mean, they're obviously pretty defensive about it because Japan's seen what it's like to not have that in living memory. So yeah, there's a lot of sensitivity around that, and that's why Japan's so kind of soft in a way around the shutdown. So have a good week, everybody. Stay safe, of course. Remember, I'm here at 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time every Sunday night. Japan doesn't have daylight savings, so it doesn't change. You guys change. Most other countries change time. So I'm here. Remember as well, you can always reach out to me on Twitter, where I am throwing peanuts through the week, occasionally hitting people I don't mean to hit. Sorry. Having fun as always. Everybody stay safe, take care, have a good week. Remember, if you like the video, like it helps, and I appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. I get a kick out of that. Final side note, New Year's resolutions and whatnot, I have been thinking again, it would be really nice if I could, if anyone knows of an easy to use, I don't know, I don't want to use an MCN or something like that, but if there are any services or anything that people are aware about that could like take this whole thing and chop it up into segments and edit it into coherent like different topics that I could post during the week. I really don't have the time to do it myself, but I'd like to do that, or make a podcast version of this. I know I could do it, but it's just a time thing. But if anyone knows options for that, I'd really appreciate it. Tell me on Twitter, and I'd actually like to follow that up and maybe find a way to do that. Throw more peanuts. Thank you, Aaron. I will get it. In that case, I'll get a new bag, a new pack of peanuts. So yeah, have a good week, everybody, and stay safe. Keep cool till after school. Subscribe, like, do all that good stuff. See you next week. Boom. Peace. Ending the stream. Throwing more peanuts.